Hello. Hi, everyone. We're just getting started. Hi. Happy Sunday. There's a lot to talk about. Lots of upsetting news, eh? So, today, I have a really special guest. Her name is Sabine. She's French. And she kind of does what I do, but French version. So I don't know if you all know her already. She's super cool. And she's been speaking out against the toxicity of spirituality on the French scene. And so obviously we bonded and really connected because I do that too, but for like the Anglophone, like North American. Hi, Sabine. So excited to have you today joining me on this live. I like to think of Sabine as my, I don't know how we say it, like homologue. How do we say homologue in English? I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm also French speaking. French actually used to be my first language, and then English took over after I lived in the States for almost 11 years. And now I'm back in Montreal, where it's a pretty francophone city, so that's been kind of nice to start speaking French again. Alors, let me see, La Sabs, if I can find you, or I think you have to request me or something, request to join. I'm sure it'll come up in a minute. Yeah, Pride Parade here in Chicago, you have mixed feelings. Tell me more. I mean, of course, like rainbow washing, pink washing, corporatization of Pride. I'm wondering if people are like talking about what's going on with the overturn. Okay, Sabine, I think you have to like stick around for a little bit, maybe like a few more minutes, and then you'll be able to join. I think, right? Like, I think at some point you are able to join. Let me see. Yeah, so how's everybody feeling about the overturn? That's really what I want to talk about. Like, I posted a video a few days ago about like how it's important for people in the spiritual space to speak up about what's going on with politics. I think it's been so common that in spiritual spaces, people think that we shouldn't be talking about politics. And I don't think that's true for multiple reasons. The first reason is when you don't talk about something, like that silence can say a lot. Like, you don't know why someone is silent about an issue. Like, that silence can very well be an endorsement of something that's not being said, right? So in a space that's gathering so many people, right? It's gathering, spiritual communities bring a lot of people together around the idea of healing and growth and self-discovery and connection. And that makes sense. Like, this is why sometimes I get people who are like, oh, you shouldn't be spiritual in the first place. Like, spirituality is an evil. We should just all be critical thinkers. And I am a critical thinker, but I also really believe in the power of connection and reconnecting to ourselves and to our bodies. This is something that like colonialism did to us also. Like, it disconnected, and capitalism too, it disconnects us from our bodies. And like Western thought and Western philosophy is so rooted in this mind over matter. So we're constantly taught to live here in our brain and to like overcome everything. And there's this huge movement that's booming now of people being like, I want to connect to my body. My body has so much wisdom, right? So I get it. I get why we're all spiritual, why we're here. But then, you know, you can be in a spiritual community and have no idea what people's positions are or what the people that you look up to, what they're thinking, because we're not talking about politics. But the thing is, spirituality is political. right? There's people who are talking about gender, who are talking about gender roles, who are talking about divine feminine, divine masculine. And you mean to tell me that that's not political? Like the kind of glamorization of the 1950s, like housewife era. Not to say all spaces are doing that, right? Like I am very open to the idea of like some kind of radical and empowering understanding of the feminine. But it's connected. Like the platforms and the frameworks that people use in their spiritual spaces is 100% tied to, you know, political things and power. Okay, so that's your group right now, D squared. I had to lay low. Right, like I think a lot of us are, well, not us, but like a lot of people in this community are reevaluating because we're going from understanding that silence and neutrality is not really neutral. And I have had people send me TikToks of folks who are, you know, spiritual influencers who are basically saying things like, you know, after in the wake of the overturn, they're basically saying things like, we live in a matrix. You know, don't get bogged down by what's happening. You still have control over your body. And like, no, with laws like these that are put in effect, we're losing control over our bodies. Like, why are you encouraging this kind of like delusional thinking when people need to understand what the reality is on the ground, right? I asked a spiritual leader her thoughts on Roe v. Wade, and she told me it was not the place. This is exactly what we're talking about. Thank you. It is the place. You know, it is the place. This is so important that you share, folks, share your testimonials because, like, I'm coming at it from a theoretical perspective, but you're the ones who are on the ground experiencing this, and I want to be able to support you. Worth noting that the right strategically targeted evangelical, to get this ball rolling. Yeah, of course, like, there's politics involved. There's, you know, in order for things like this so momentous to get overturned, there's a lot of mobilization and a lot of organization going on. So we also need to organize on the left and not just be like, you know, like we have to actually mobilize in collective action. And, you know, these are very important things. Yes, there's spiritual leaders who avoid politics because they just want to be palatable to as many people. Yes, 100%. And then there's people who have opinions, but they're not going to say it just yet. You know, someone shared with me on comments that there's this organization called Gaia and how like they just do yoga videos, but then at some point they'll start talking to you about like knowledge you're not ready for. Like, what the hell is knowledge you're not ready for? Like conspiracy theories, of course. Like, I feel like spirituality can only be individualistic if it's not conscious of political issues. Yeah, Sabine, let's get you on. I'm still trying to figure out how to get you on. Andrew, are you asking me my name or whose name are you asking? My name is Steph. The left's unwillingness to engage with spirituality hurts the left. Like, I actually think it's important. I think people just don't want to touch spirituality by a 10-foot pole because it's so complex and jargon. It's full of jargon. And on the facade of it, it's just like crystals and energy and reconnection. So you kind of really have to be in it to experience the discombobulation and then kind of have to come out of it to be like, holy shit, what the hell was that? Like, I was slowly getting pulled into a completely different direction that isn't like aligned with me. And I find that a lot, that like folks who want to be spiritual feel like their spirituality doesn't really align with their like leftist or, you know, their political values. So this is why we're here, like to recalibrate and to be like, we can be spiritual and radical as fuck, you know? Yeah, of course it does. Andrew, I'm based in Canada. I'm based in Montreal. We're talking about all the cosmic things happening, but never here on Earth. Yeah, they're like just basically saying, you know, like it's all about ascension to 5D. Like, who cares that Roe got overturned? Yeah, exactly. You don't want to be, I love this, Whitney Jade Yoga. I don't want to be palatable to people who don't think I deserve autonomy over my body. Sorry, I got confused with the next line. Yeah, of course. Yeah, like that video that got sent to me about the person who was like, oh, you still have control over your body. Like, who cares that Roe got overturned? Like, this is just like we all live in a matrix. We all live in a matrix. Like, be careful of that language, y'all. I've seen that too with like, one time it came onto my For You page. Someone was like, oh, you know, people complaining about gas prices rising, but I can't relate because I live in an abundance mentality. Like, this is exactly the kind of like disconnection that this language creates. It kind of pulls you away from the reality of things. And not only that, but it puts you like, you start thinking you're superior because you're not feeling rage, or you're not feeling upset, or you're not feeling connected to the reality of things. You're just feeling like, oh, it's just, you know, I'm above it. Yeah, exactly. Say, Sabine, I love your points. I'm trying to get you on. Ah, there we go. Invite sent to you, Sabine. Sabine is awesome. So if you haven't followed her yet, really cool. And she does exactly what I do, but in French. So if you're French speaking, or if you know anyone from France, and also Sabine is so sharp and so smart on political issues and has come from the yoga space. So the Vipassana, and has a lot to say about the yoga industry, the yoga space. Sabine, are you on?
Can you hear me?
Yes,
I think
we can.
I'm on. Yeah,
But
but you
your
cannot
video's
see me,
not on.
right?
Yeah, I can't see you,
Okay,
but
I really don't know how to put the video on. I really don't know.
hi, from Arizona. Hi, nice to see you. Hi, Bibo Beat. Y'all have like the cutest account names. What is that even? So Sabine, Sabine is here, and we want to talk about our experience being voices of dissent in spirituality, in the spiritual space. I feel like this is a really, especially at this time, it's important for us to not normalize um, silence and complacency, and to call out when we start seeing some red flags in spiritual spaces, right? So Sabine, how has your experience been? And also, by the way, if anyone knows how to get Sabine's video on, please
Yeah, that would
please
be
help
great.
us.
But if you can hear me, that's like the best thing.
Yeah, we can hear you. Hi, Comrade Muerte. Hi, people. Y'all are so cute. Okay, so Sabine, tell us, what has been, how did you give us a little bit of your history, since you come from like Vipassana space, yoga space? Like,
Yeah.
what clicked for you? How did your journey into starting to notice the red flags? Like, how did that start?
Yeah, well, I began my spiritual journey like when I was 24, so 3 years ago. I was from like a really rational family and a really rational environment because I went to a business school and then I have like really corporate jobs, so really rational environments. And I really felt like there was a disconnection between the empathy I felt within myself and the environment I was in. So I started to dig in spirituality and meditation. I went to do a Vipassana retreat in 2018, and that was really like a life-changing experience for me. Um,
Mm.
I I really felt that I could not be in the rational environment anymore. So I felt this kind of cognitive dissonance for years, and then I decided that I should do a thing against it, and I quit my corporate job to become a full-time yoga teacher. I already did a the yoga retreat, and I felt like there was some kind of problems, but I wasn't ready to dig in like the feeling I was feeling. So I kept doing yoga and I went to this yoga teacher training, and that's where I really started to, I don't know, unpack things because I could observe connection between, I don't know, divine feminine, really things that I already impact in my feminism journey or I don't know, action. And I say, okay, like this thing really bothered me and I cannot agree on feeling divine feminine because this is not right for me. And I started to speak out about it in my community, saying, well, how do you, I don't know, deal with trans identity in the divine feminine ideology? And I realized that there was no way I could question anything in the yoga or spiritual community I was in. And I was like, okay,
Mm,
well, this is weird. And I really felt like there was some kind of gaslighting whenever
mm,
people try to, I don't know, question things in place or ideology. That's where I really, I don't know,
mhm,
unpack things. And then I started
mm.
this TikTok account like 3 months ago in February or March. I don't remember. At first, I didn't think I was going to do like a TikTok account speaking about spirituality and trying to unpack things. But the more I published, the more I discovered that I had things to say and
Mhm.
that they needed to be said.
I love that. Your account is so interesting. I really love your perspective and
Well, yours
what
too.
you're, thank you. What you're saying about like, you're in a space and you're learning about the divine feminine, right? Someone in the comments, I
Yeah,
think it was Sonia, you were saying it's so important to talk about esoteric trends. Like, I really feel like the divine feminine is an esoteric trend. Like, it's a new age gender construct. Like, if we're
yeah,
going to use actually like, like theoretical terms, it's a new age gender construct. It's not a gender construct that exists anywhere else that in new age spaces. So, and it's like this is the thing, like gender is constructed. This is my school of thought. This is I'm using like Judith Butler, I'm using like
yeah,
queer theory, trans philosophy to help us understand that gender, like there's no such thing, like what we think of masculine and feminine is socially
for
constructed
sure.
and interpreted,
Yeah.
you know?
I feel like the idea of divine feminine or masculine energy is some kind of backlash from every feminist action that and I don't know evolution of the society. And we come
Mm-hmm.
from okay, there are too many evolution, and we need to step back and go to traditional forms of femininity, but like repackaged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know what? It's exactly that. It's that traditional form. And you know why they're presenting it as revolutionary? Revolutionary is they're basically saying this is a form of femininity that has been like oppressed by the patriarchy. And the way that we want, and so for us to basically reconnect to that femininity is a revolutionary act. And
Yeah,
this is like it sounds good, but it's not
yeah,
really not true. Like this is basically like in the 60s when the feminist movement was like birthing and growing. You had like conservative pundits, like conservative women who were saying like, "No, it's feminist for us to like cook in the kitchen and take care of our man. That's a feminist
yeah.
thing." Demon of Thursday, I'll get to human design in 1 second. I actually have a lot to say because I was sucked into that world. So we'll get to that. We'll definitely talk about that because I know it's big in Germany. Um, Sabine is based in France, by the way. So our guest speaker, La Sabs, is based in France, just
Yeah,
one of you asked.
I guess you can
And
hear that by my accent, right?
so that's to say, like, this version of femininity, the like kind of like soft and nurturing and motherly and like connected to the earth and stuff, there's nothing bad about that. And it's true that in capitalism we kind of lose touch with the beauty of what that means, but to the way that it plugs in, the way that it fits into these spaces is that it's basically saying you will be happier as a woman if you disconnect from like the masculine spaces that you're in and you just be feminine because that feminine can like fix you, you know?
Well, I think it can be more subtle than that because I've seen many TikToks saying that you should embrace your feminine energy in order to be a successful entrepreneur, which I
Mm,
find really cringy because
yeah.
how is that? Like some TikTok said you should embrace your feminine energy within the masculine energy structure, and I feel
Mm-hmm.
really that's super confusing
Yeah.
in that the genderness of masculine and femininity, and what does that thing have to do with entrepreneurship? I really don't know.
Absolutely. It's distracting. It's distracting. So what a lot of these things do, and you have to watch out for, y'all, is that a lot of these statements that are made in spiritual spaces are actually distracting from the bigger picture. So when someone says like tap into your feminine energy in the corporate space so you can be successful, they're not actually talking about like the toxicity of the corporate space. They're not talking about bro culture. They're not talking
Mm-mm.
about toxic masculinity. They're not talking about how environments like that are so hostile to women in the workplace. Instead
Mm-hmm.
of, and so therefore they're kind of normalizing it and say, it's okay if that keeps going. Don't worry about them, just focus on yourself. But we actually need to be fighting for a
Mm-hmm.
safer workplace for women in the workplace. You know, we need to, this is what we need to be focusing on, as opposed to saying like tap into your feminine energy, which actually doesn't really mean anything. Like when you break it down, like what does it really mean?
It
It's
doesn't
vague.
mean. But I really feel like those the spiritual TikTok leaders saying that you should embrace your divine feminine energy in order to be a successful entrepreneur is really like saying you should be the best of femininity, but also the best of masculinity. Like really, you have to become rich like a man, but also feminine like a woman, and it's super toxic.
Yeah. Yeah. This is resonating with Demon of Thursday's comment. Like what you're hearing is do more corporate, more production. You know, that's true.
Yeah.
Like no one's actually questioning the capitalist cycle of productivity. No one's questioning these capitalist norms. That's why we're also talking about spiritualizing capitalism. You know, it just
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
becomes part of who we are and like part of our being. Yeah. I'm seeing here in the comments, Sonia saying that Germany has a long and strong history of the esoteric pipe, and the pipeline is really short. And
Mm-hmm.
you're 100% on point. I have a series on my page, a playlist of like the far right, the new age to far right pipeline,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been doing research about, you know, the Third Reich and Nazi Germany and stuff, and how they were also interested in the occult and used the occult to uphold like fascistic state propaganda. So I'm reading a lot of very interesting articles, a lot of knowledge, and I'm hoping to like distill it into like small video forms. But you know, Sonia, this is really interesting. And if you ever have any material for me, please reach out. I would love that. Yeah. Sabine, any thoughts about like the girl boss language? Do you see that also?
Yeah, I really see that a lot on my For You page. Sometimes it's like with a spiritual branding, saying, okay, the law of attraction helped me in becoming the woman I am today and the girl boss I am today. Sometimes it
Mhm.
has nothing to do with spirituality, but I feel like in both ways, it's not as feminist as you can
Yeah.
really see, because it's a way of saying that you can become as good as a man and like adopt masculine ways of behaving. And yeah, I think it's kind of a toxic uh, femininity in a way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I really love the discussion that's happening in the chat. It's another version of the patriarchal capitalist double bind. It ghettoizes women within capitalism, telling them that they have to be successful, but they also have to be, you know, good,
Exactly.
nurturing mothers. You know, it's
Yeah,
that double thing. Exactly what feminists have been fighting for.
yeah.
Like, I think this is what's so pervasive about spirituality is that it kind of it touches on our sore points, on our like pain points as women or you know as minorities that are struggling in the system, and it's saying like, hey, I know why you're struggling. You're feeling disconnected from yourself. Here's the
Hmm.
solution: traditional values, very
Hmm.
very traditional values, and therefore, and that's how people start slipping. And it's not always
Hmm.
obvious, but next thing you know, you're like, yeah, like my cycle, like, you know, um, it's a really fine line because there's some people that are doing really good work about like cyclical living and like listening to your menstrual cycle, how that can be empowering. But there's a fine line between being empowered by that cycle and then feeling kind of constricted by that cycle and thinking like,
Yeah, I
oh,
totally agree with that. Yeah.
yes, it's a question of degree and emphasis, and that's why these spaces are so it's so delicate, because you can find yourself entering as someone who's like dedicated to like women's liberation and feminist and all these things, but then the next thing you know, like that space kind of makes you like pull back into these very antiquated gender norms that
Yeah,
are.
definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Mhm. And I've seen this on your page too, like very heated discussions that you've been in. And like almost like I feel like a lot of backlash. I feel like you get a lot of backlash.
Yeah,
I do too. And I definitely want to talk about that, like in terms of like our mental health as
yeah,
like creators, what that means.
definitely. I'm also curious whether there is a difference between French speakers come like viewers and English speaker viewers, you know? Like, do French people angrier? I don't know.
Yeah. I feel this when I'm on your page and I read the comments. I'm like, whoa, like people are intense, like the fights are intense. I feel like on my page, the most stressful experiences for me have been when I go viral, because that's when I deal with a lot of like
Yeah, yeah, me too.
backlash and condescension. What really gets me, the argument that really gets me, is people saying that I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
And
I
it's like
also have that one.
it's so common to be like, oh, you just don't know what you're talking about. Like, that's not how manifestation works. And I'm like, it does not take a rocket science to know how manifestation works. But what they mean when they say that I don't know what I'm talking about, really, like the implicit message there is that I'm not a part of that community. I'm not like in it with them. So therefore, because I'm on the outside and I'm giving like a critique, they can't receive it and they won't receive it. They don't
hmm
want to receive it because I'm
Well,
not in it. I'm not like a manifestation stan or fan, you know? So because I'm coming from the outside, this is their push.
Well, this is interesting because at first my TikTok account was really like I was a spiritual woman and I decided to unpack things and now I don't have any spiritual practices. And I think that this speech kind of backlashed to me because people said, okay, well, you went too far into spirituality. That's why now you see toxic traits, but that doesn't mean spirituality should be, I don't know, unpacked. So I think that I'm also experiencing this kind of comments, but even though I'm a spiritual member in a way.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, it's like kind of like your membership card gets revoked if you're
Yeah,
not aligned.
yeah. You should not be too spiritual to be talking about spirituality, but also you should not be non-spiritual. So it's like a really thin line, and
Yeah.
it's impossible to stand here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But that's the thing, and the line is constantly changing. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh, I find that folks like sometimes confuse argumentation with condescension and manipulation. So that changing the line of like where you belong is a form of gaslighting and manipulation. Be like, oh yeah, okay,
Yeah.
you're gonna belong if you say this, but then you say this, and they're like, no, you don't belong. Like it's just such a weird, like it's so unstable. The ground on which we're walking is unstable, and that's the point. We're saying things that people don't want to hear or that are like unsettling. And I think like
Yeah.
this important, y'all. Like that feeling of unsettling is important. It's not. I think someone was like called me out and was saying like people are traumatized and they're not ready for this information, which is like I don't think that's true. Like we're not calling out and being in opposition is not traumatizing people. It's I understand it
hmm
making people come out of their comfort zone, which is literally like a form of decolonization. Like indigenous philosophers talk about this unsettling. Like
Yeah.
in English, like feeling unsettled means like ah, je me sens pas à l'aise. Like I feel, genre, I don't feel comfortable on where I'm sitting, and that unsettling is important for us in this space to feel unsettled. That it's not a bad thing to actually like check ourselves, investigate what our message is, where we're at, reevaluate. Some of you in the comments were saying that you're reevaluating, and that unsettledness is we want to embrace that, we want to work with that, but at the same time, like, we're here to support each other as we feel unsettled collectively, because that's the work that we want to do.
I feel like it's impossible to not present as condescendent when you try to explain things and you try to unpack things and kind of be, I don't know, à contre-courant. I don't know how to say that in English, but it's
Yeah,
always be,
against the grain. Against the grain.
yeah, exactly. People will always say that this is condescendent.
Yeah, it is. The condescension really gets me because I'm like, I know what I'm talking about. Like, it kind of fucks with my brain because I'm like,
Yeah,
what do you mean I don't know what I'm talking about? Like, I know what I'm talking
yeah,
about. Like,
but yeah, you're kind
it
of
really,
doubting of yourself. Like, am I like legitimate enough to talk about this?
yeah,
Yeah, I think
yeah,
because I've experienced it and I educated myself on this topic. So yeah,
yeah, exactly. Like, it really, um, it's just a tactic. And so for now, I've decided to stop engaging with like condescending
mm,
comments. I will engage with people who have very thoughtful arguments that even if I don't agree with them, like, you can tell when someone's arguing something and they're arguing and they're using a real argument. A real argument, I'll work with that anytime because I also don't have like the answers. I think that's the other thing. It's like
yeah,
I'm critical of manifestation. Um, but I've seen some people offer some really good definitions of manifestation that are workable. Like, you can work with that. And I'm like, okay with it, you know? So I don't really have an answer for people. Same with the divine feminine, you know, like, can we come up with a definition of the divine feminine that is empowering and that can like really push us into a new realm? It's just a question of construction. It's just a question of how we're going to construct and frame the feminine. And the way that it's being framed right now is really sexist. Can
yeah,
we frame the feminine differently? I think we can. But you know, that's not my niche, but I'm excited and
yeah.
looking forward to seeing people do that work, you know? And I can support people in doing that work.
I think it's super hard to have a nuanced discourse on TikTok because when you speak out on things, like the TikTok formats tend to be really, really short. So you have to really be, I don't know, direct in the way
Yeah,
you speak out things. And sometimes it's really hard to be, yes, the law of attraction is bad, but not so bad. You know what I mean? You couldn't do that on
yeah.
TikTok. Like
Yeah,
it would
that
be
nuance.
impossible.
That nuance is really hard. I've actually been thinking about that a lot because I offer like educational workshops where we look at social history, we look at theory. Like the one that I did yesterday, we were studying Marx, we were studying Federici, we were reading books. You know, like
Super interesting.
this. Yeah, it's like it's super cool. And in those spaces, we can really dive into the intricacies, the nuance. But we have to, this is what I say to my students, like, we have to start with pointing out what's wrong. I know it can be unsettling and like fatiguing to point out what's wrong, but in order for us to move into green flags, for us to move into building something better, we have to understand what's wrong and why it's wrong. And this is why
Hmm.
education and studying and being a student of decolonialism and capitalism, like studying these things is really, really essential so that we can move into thinking about what are the solutions, how are we going to be part of the solution. So I don't know why I started talking about that because you said something that made me think about that.
I don't remember.
But I mean, let's take a look at the comments. Can you see the comments
Yeah,
too, or is it just me?
yeah, I can see the comments.
I'm seeing a really good conversation happening. Lauren or Yarn 247. Thank you for being here, for supporting us. We really appreciate it. That backlash
Yeah.
has led to many a meltdown. I will tell you that. So Blue Morph, you're saying always felt like spiritual women talking about menstrual cycles assumes that if you're irregular, you're somehow a bad woman or not in tune with yourself.
Yeah.
This is, of course, this is the risk with whenever you start defining something or whenever you start creating rules. It's kind of the same in like the wellness community. Like when you start telling people what's the right thing to do, then inherently you're also creating a bad thing. So when you think you're irregular, even if the teacher is like, it's okay for you to be irregular, you know, society and that, you still feel like it's really hard for you not to blame yourself and be like, well, I'm irregular. I was, you know, bleeding with the new moon and now I'm bleeding with the full moon and I'm not, you know, it's like kind of all over the place. Like it's really hard not to think that we're doing something wrong because of that bigger structure that's creating the like a highway for what's right. So when you create that highway and you deviate from that path, then you think, oh, I'm doing something wrong or I'm bad. And people be just saying it's evangelical Christianity repackaged. Like a lot of this is adjacent to Christianity. And I was reading articles about how like the this like divine feminine and this like return to kind of almost like the primal way of being, you know, the primal like big bestial like masculine man that was a warrior and like the woman that was embodied, like I don't know if you've heard of like the embodied
Yeah.
motherhood, like embodied mamas, you know, like connected to the land, that like bleed freely.
Yeah.
Like first of all, like Sabine, I'm sure you can correlate it. This is a constructed understanding of the past. Like
Yeah,
no one
completely.
said
It's really like an alt-right way to be rethinking the past and idealizing, I don't know how to say that, the past. That never
exactly.
happened.
It never happened, and it's basically like a projection of modern social dynamics, patriarchal social dynamics being projected onto the whatever the Bronze Age. You know, it's being projected onto early human life, and it's basically saying we've always been like this. I
Mm-hmm.
highly recommend you take a look at the book. It's called Against Nature. It's a really tiny book, very accessible to read. It's by Lorraine Daston, and it's about how the argument of nature has always been used to support
Mm-hmm.
social constructed ideas. So even the idea of like gender, I get this a lot in my comments, people being like, masculine and feminine, like look at nature. You have females and males and you have masculine and feminine everywhere. So that's of course like it's biological for us too. And it's not true. Like there's a ton of like non-masculine and feminine creatures out there that are like either both. There's also places like in nature where you don't need masculine and feminine in order to
Yeah,
procreate. So it's like,
definitely.
why are we not focusing on that, you know?
Yeah, they choose what they like within the nature and the I don't know, like really rephrasing what the nature had to say in a way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So this is why when people tell me, oh, but like masculine and feminine, like that exists in real life. I'm like, yes, maybe, but the way that we talk about it, the way that we have discourse about it is already done through a social lens. So when we're talking about masculine and feminine, even when we're looking at, you know, animals reproducing or when we're talking about us as humans and stuff, like it's still interpreted through a social lens. This is Judith Butler's argument that like
Mm-hmm.
yes, maybe there's science somewhere, but we just cannot get to the truth because it's so
Yeah.
intertwined like social relations of power, and we cannot talk about biology outside of the patriarchy. Like
Mm-hmm.
biology is also, it also is part of this society. It doesn't exist like as an omniscient source of truth out there and then we're just here and then biology is out here. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly what like social scientists have been arguing, is that you can't just like posit objective truths out there like science, because science itself is also a question of how we frame things and what we
Yeah.
choose to research. Like why is it that like women's and obstetrics and stuff, it's like so under researched, like the tools that are being used in an OBGYN office, they're like medieval level tools. Like no one really thinks about our comfort. No one, like whenever we go to an OBGYN, it's like such an aggressive, like intrusive experience. Like science itself, there's people behind science, you know?
Mm-hmm. And we all have bias. And the patriarchy and the sexism is a bias within the
Mm-hmm.
scientific community as well.
Such an important point. Yeah, it's true. This is the French guy, the French philosopher. I'm sure, like Bruno Latour writes about this. He writes about this. He did some. He was like, I think he's an anthropologist that went like and did some research on scientists and like talks about even like science experiments, what gets funded, what doesn't get funded. You know, how even like the process of like getting a publication out, all of that, like there's biases, there's social constrictions too.
Yeah, definitely.
So soul school Molly, you've said some really good stuff here. I create my own reality is often used as gaslighting, and this is exactly what we saw with that video that I was mentioning earlier about that creator that was responding to one of her followers that was basically like, I'm so upset about the overturn. And she responded by saying, we create our own reality, like you know, you're not a victim, like you have control over your body, don't worry, you know. And it's like, I mean, we're starting to like lose our rights over our body, like
Yeah. That remind me. I think that you were talking about that when I was not in the live, but this remind me of a TikTok I saw yesterday. Maybe that's the one I sent you, but
that's the one you
saying,
sent me.
yeah, you should remain neutral towards the bad news that you are experiencing. But it's like a really, I don't know, free rider position towards bad news, and like I think that's anger is really like a healthy emotion, you know?
It really is. And she ended by talking about like 5D and like we're all ascending to 5D or something.
Uh, Everything is a simulation.
Yep, everything is a simulation. And you know what's dangerous? This is also this kind of like gaslighting and like
Mm-hmm,
policing is also built into law of attraction in the
mm-hmm,
sense that when you tell people that you have to be positive and that you can't linger, you can't dwell on your negative feelings, and that you can't like because the negative feelings are going to block the attraction, that's a way of policing yourself and telling yourself, oh, it's too low vibe for me to feel angry about this, so I'm just going to
yeah.
like be positive. It's like forcing you to dissociate from reality, when in these moments like anger is what we need in order to mobilize and
Mm.
organize.
That's some kind of condescendent position to be like to feel detached from bad news. Like
Yeah,
you're not experiencing social injustice. Are you like away from society?
yeah, exactly. It takes a lot of privilege to be like, oh, I'm just going to be above it.
Exactly.
um, but like, what does that privilege mean when we're talking about overturning Roe v. Wade? Like, it's privilege of like, oh, maybe I don't, this law doesn't really affect me because I want to have kids, maybe, or like this law doesn't really affect me because I'm past the childbearing age. And it's like, it's so selfish because this is
Yeah.
affecting
Super
all of
selfish.
us. And this also like goes to show like how like there's so much privilege rooted in this idea that I can just dissociate. And this is also the history of like
Mm-hmm.
white supremacy and racism, is that like white folks have been able to dissociate for a for like a super basically forever, because you know a lot of the violence of the state was not directed at them, it was directed at people of
Yeah.
color and minorities.
Mm-hmm.
And now that the violence of the state is being extended to them, there is like mass mobilization and anger. And this anger might feel very new, but for others, it might feel like it's an anger that's kind of like built into their DNA. You know, it's an anger that's
Yeah.
been passed on genealogically, like generation to generation. So
Yeah.
that's the privilege. Yeah. Sonia, I love your interventions. You're saying like you a lot of these things are an answer for the longing for something other than modernism. Yes, we talk about that in my classes as well, like how like Western philosophy and Western society is built on this idea of basically the mind above everything. Like think about Descartes. Descartes was writing in like the 1600s and was like, I think therefore I am. Like what makes me human, what makes me a person is that I think. What happens is that not every culture around the world has that like mind centricity and that hierarchy between mind and body. Like in the West, the mind is above the body. The body, we can fucking like abuse our bodies. It doesn't matter. Like as long as we're successful, as long as we're here,
Mm-hmm.
as long as we're here, you know. And more people are like, actually, I want to reconnect with my body. I feel like that's part of why I feel so disconnected, why I feel so burnt out. I want to reconnect. But the problem is what happens is in a lot of these like mind body communities, the answer to that is that they go look at other cultures and then they kind of like bring back or import all these like ways of connecting that then creates like, you know, cultural appropriation and cultural theft. So
Mm-hmm.
it gets really dicey because it's like, well, you know, colonization erased and took away all these traditions from the people to whom it belongs, and now it's kind of being re-imported and redefined in this. So you're 100% right about this longing for something other than modernity. Blue Morph, you're saying someone said, what's MW? Is that an acronym? Sorry. Don't you know the law? Don't you know the law of attraction? Because I've had a lot of bad things happen to me. Were they kind of saying, oh, next sentence, I guess it's my fault because I attracted it by expecting bad things to happen. Like that's so hurt. That's not empowering. Like that's the place that we want to come from, is like, is your spirituality empowering? Is the framework
Mm-hmm.
empowering? Coaches need to be aware that their platform has influence and that they're leaders and they're thought leaders. They're shaping how you think. That's a shit ton of responsibility. And people need to be ethically aware of that responsibility. And they need to question that. Like a lot of people out there are power hungry and they want that power over you and over your thoughts. But like we need to push back against that, because
Mm-hmm.
then people are saying things like this to Blue Morph, and that can already, like, depending on where you are on your journey, like that can fuck someone up, you know? It's
Yeah.
not
That's super painful to hear.
it is. It's not your fault. Like Blue Morph, I'm just reading the comments. Like I'm so grateful that everyone in this room is like loving and supportive. I love you all, and
Yeah,
thank
it's
you for
super nice
supporting
to
each
be,
other.
yeah, to be reading those kind of comments.
Mm-hmm.
It's super encouraging.
Yes. If you ever feel like, if you ever need us to just remind you that you're doing amazing, that you're doing okay, and that you need to hang in there, and that just keep doing what you're doing and love yourself and rest when you need to, and like bad things happen not because of you. Like a lot of bad things are actually happening because society and people suck, and you know, toxic masculinity and patriarchy and racism. Like it's not you. And I think this discourse is again bringing it back to you, when the conversation should be about the bigger picture. You know, I've
Mm-hmm.
had so many people in comments be like, oh, I told someone about my trauma and they just told me that I needed to find the lesson. But it's like, well, what about the perpetrator? What about the people who are doing the violence? Like, why aren't we talking about that? You know, why aren't we talking about how we need to be changing the culture and we need to be making
Yeah.
society a safer place?
I do believe that this is the limit of New Age spirituality and self-help. Like you have to see the broader picture, to the larger picture, and really tackle the oppressive system and like collective trauma instead of just your individual trauma, because your individual trauma always ends up being like a more broader problem in the society.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When we start seeing that our experiences are a symptom of a bigger
Mm-hmm.
problem, like of a bigger
Yeah.
socialization, social layer, that creates a lot more solidarity and like collective bonds between
Yeah,
us.
it's way more powerful to be like collectively fighting against those trauma.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So okay, let's say, I feel like y'all are super active. I love this. Sorry, we're a little bit behind on the comments.
Yeah,
D squared. G squared, you're saying that you feel like you don't belong because you're part of the minority. I would love to hear more, because if you're willing to share, because I see this a lot. Like, the thing is, new age spaces, they're so white and they're so like cis and straight that they end up excluding a lot of people who are trying to reconnect to themselves, that aren't necessarily fitting in that mold. But there are also like plenty of healers out there that are doing great work, that are like, you know, queer, that are POC, that are bridging. But it's just really important that the platform itself is decolonial, because you'll see a lot of like POC and like queer folks just kind of taking on the messages from these like frameworks that are, you know, rooted in whiteness, and they're repeating it because that's what they learn. They go get a certification. That's what they're learning. So there's a bit of a disconnect between like positionality and the framework that they're teaching, because the framework that they're teaching is not resonant or like not always empowering, you know? You got over gender via your study of non-human animals and nature. Gender doesn't exist out there. Yes, you would love, Vaysan, you would love a poem by my friend Jess Snow. Maybe if you want to DM me, I'll send it to you. Jess is a queer NB poet who writes about these things and wrote a beautiful poem about nature and like how gender is like so queer in nature, and nature is queer. But you know, the way that we look at nature is super binary because we are binary. Society is binary. Nature is not binary. You know what I mean? So this is again going back to the idea of like the social lens is filtering how we see nature. So if we're queering our lens, the way we see nature is going to be different. So nature is not the problem; it's how we see things, you know. Sonia's saying, at my university, the biologist teacher said, first-year students, we are social science. That's really progressive. A lot of biologists would not say that. Yeah. Science is a human endeavor. Academia is so political. It absolutely is. Angela Saini's book, Inferior and Superior, very interesting. Thank you. I love this. Thank you for recommending books. Katie Byron, victim blaming. I will look into that. If you want to DM me, Sonia, we can talk. Give me your resources. I'd love to look into it. Don't actually feel bad. Don't actually feel your bad emotions because they will create more bad. Like, yeah, exactly. Whereas I know there's some like healers and spiritual coaches out there that are like, no, you should feel your bad anger and you can manifest with anger. I'm still not sure how I feel about that argument of like manifesting with your anger. Sabine, I don't know if you have thoughts about that, like manifesting with your anger, but I'm still
I
simmering
don't know,
on that.
because like I've seen also spiritual leaders saying that you should not I don't know, be toxic positive, and you have to feel your bad emotion. But I do feel that there is like some kind of paradox saying that you can manifest with your feelings and your positive feelings, and saying you should your bad feelings will not manifest anything. I think that there is like really a paradox that I cannot understand. And I kind of have mixed feelings on these topics.
Yeah, I feel like again, like if we're using the framework of like diversion, like what is it diverting us from? Like if we're manifesting like for our own individual purposes with our anger, like is it real? Are we really talking about the source of the anger? And why we need to be talking about the source of the anger? Like, I feel like so much of it is like, let's bring it back to hyper individualism. Whereas our approach is to say, let's step out of our hyper individualism because we're already hyper individualists already. And like, let's think about like how we're, you know, how this is connecting to bigger, to the bigger picture. I'm seeing that, I'm seeing Temperance Queer Tarot is here, which I'm such a fan of your work. I love you so much. If you're still here, I am a fan. Definitely go follow them. They're amazing. Okay. Should I keep going through the chat? How are you feeling? Like, do you want to ask us questions? Do you want to ask Sabine questions? I feel like a pressing question that comes up a lot is like, well, okay, now we're talking about like toxic spirituality. Like, what about healthy spirituality? What does healthy look like? Like, what do we want healthy to look like? So if
Mm-hmm.
this is a question that's interesting for you, maybe we can wrap up and close
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
on this. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great topic. I think you made a TikTok recently, telling what would be the green flags on spirituality, and I think that, well, the like the characteristic you should find is, do you feel safe in your community? Do you feel like you can express your feelings, that you can express truly who you are in a way? I really feel like when I didn't feel comfortable in my communities is whenever I felt like I could not express the the totality of who I was, and like I had to hide that, I don't know, I didn't fit in those kind of ideology, and I couldn't speak out. This is where I realized that, okay, this is not safe for me. I think this is the only characteristic that you should find in your spiritual community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I am going to do. I'm getting a little frustrated with TikTok, not only because of
Mm-hmm.
like the impact it's having on my mental health, but also like I want to talk for more than 3 minutes. Like obviously you see this live. Like we have a lot to say, and so I'm going to do a short. I'm going to try to keep it short. YouTube video about my thoughts about like how to move from red flags to green flags. And I already drafted it because I did it in class with my students. Like we unexamined power relations in a spiritual community is like one of the first things about moving from red flag to green flag. And the way that I think about it is like, is your spiritual community or the spiritual spaces that you're in, or you know who you are, like, does it feel like a tyranny, like a dictatorship, where the
Mm-hmm.
architecture of power is like one person at the top and then everyone's following and listening? Because if we have that structure, that monarchical, tyrannical structure, what that does is that there's also internal policing within the community. So maybe the leader is not disagreeing with you or you're not pushing back against the leader, but if you're pushing back against your friends or your community,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to police you internally. So that's what you're saying, Sabine, about you not feeling comfortable, like push back when you're like in these like divine feminine spaces, because maybe it's not the leader who's like, pushing
Yeah,
back at
it's
you.
the group pressure, definitely.
It's the group pressure. Yeah, it's the group pressure. So we want to move away from that structure to a more horizontal structure. So,
Mm-hmm.
I use the word democratic, power, democratic relations a lot because democracy is something we can wrap our heads around. But really, what I want to do is move beyond that and think about horizontality completely. Because
Mm-hmm.
if we're also talking about like the colonial framework, this top bottom structure is very colonial. It's like one person's at the top and the language is very like saviorism. Like if we're thinking about like white saviorism, the leader is there to save you and you're all here waiting to be fixed and you're waiting to be saved. And so much of that marketing is also reinforcing that idea of like, I'm an expert, I figured my life out and I'm here to save you
Mm-hmm.
all. If you just, sign up for my soul awakening program, my 2-week container, whatever, like I will fix you, right? That's the message. So if we want to move away from that structure to a more horizontal structure, there is no person that's like, I'm going to fix you. That fixing goes away and we're all on the same plane. So even
Mm-hmm.
though, the community might be organized around someone in particular that kind of brought everybody together, it's still this idea of like, I'm not here to fix you. I have some thoughts to share, but you also have some thoughts to share, and let's all share with each other and like let's build together. So the
Mm-hmm.
vibe is totally different.
Yeah, yeah.
um any more thoughts, Daston? I want to pull up the poem by Jess. Let me pull it up now so I can give you the title, or maybe we can close by reading it. That would be really nice.
Yeah, that would be
um
really powerful.
That would be so cool. So this is my dream, y'all. Like I want to kind of move these like deeper conversations to YouTube so we have more space and
Mm-hmm.
that people can watch the replay. I was actually going to ask you about this, Sabine, like maybe we can talk about this later, but if you would be interested and you would give me your consent, like I would post this on YouTube and you can do the same on your networks because the conversation
Yeah.
is very valuable and I don't want it to disappear into the void of TikTok,
Yeah, that would be a great idea. And we should do that again in French.
Oh, that would be cool.
That would
Yeah,
be
I would love
cool.
that. Yeah. Temperance, queer tarot. If you're still in the room, like we can add you so you can, if you want to pop in and say hello. If you're still here, I'm not sure because I'm scrolling through love hate for TikTok for sure. If you want to request to join or, I am so impressed with all of you. Like, okay, where would you start as a POC? Where would you start as a POC to educate yourself? Uh, are you into books? Because if you're into reading, I have some good recommendations of books to read. Temperance Queer Tarot, who I've been mentioning, is an amazing scholar and a source of tarot reader and witch, just an awesome person. Of course, my class allows conversation. Come to my classes. I'd love to have you. All of you, by the way, like you love watching and listening, but you're open to books too. Yeah, so my classes are a combination of lecturing and conversation. So the next class that I'm doing is in 2 weeks, and we're talking about gender. I do like classes that are for the general public and then that are more like grassroots, and then I have classes that are for coaches specifically. So the one that I'm doing in 2 weeks is about gender inclusive coaching. So we're going to talk and think about frameworks and words and concepts that can help make everybody feel included in the spiritual space and not feel erased, because there is a lot of like trans erasure. There's a lot of like platforms that kind of create dysphoria for people and like erasure of queer people, specifically because these spaces are actually like repackaged like traditional alt-right. So even if they're not saying it, that's what it is in practice, so that if you all want to learn more about that. Yeah, you were gonna say something, Sabine?
No, I was agreeing with you.
Okay, I found the poem. It's kind of long, but we can close with that. Yes, you have so many questions. So Des, I definitely stay in touch if you want to have more conversations. The ones in late July and August are going to be like more activisty. So we're going to do an Unpacking Sexism and Spirituality workshop. And I'm also doing an Intro to Decolonization workshop. So, that's where you're really going to learn like the history. You're going to learn the history of colonization, of decolonization, of colonization, spirituality, whiteness. This is and cultural appropriation. That's the workshop where we're going to talk about that. Yeah, definitely stay in touch. I'm currently like my setup right now for my courses is super DIY. I'm trying to make it a little bit smoother of an experience. And I'm also gonna try to build a community for us to keep chatting. That I'm still, I don't know, if you have thoughts about a community, I'm thinking maybe Facebook group, maybe something else. I want it to be a free community where we can all just chat and get to know each other and share experiences and support each other, because clearly we all need that support and that love. And I feel like TikTok is not really for that.
Maybe you can join Twitch. I think that this community spirit is like way more present on Twitch, and I was thinking about this myself, like have this kind of live experience where you have a live conversation with your community.
What I would love, Sabine, is for all the decolonial and all the like spiritual activists and spiritual leftists I know to get together on one platform. Because first of all, like hosting a community is a lot of work. So I can imagine a way in which like if we were all on the same platform and supporting the same people and our community was growing, that would be really cool. Discord, you're exploring circles, so which host needs to pay for? I don't know, like Discord feels very like, I tried it and it doesn't feel like people can comment on each other's threads, I have been in a community, I've been in like Mighty Networks, and I liked Mighty Networks, but unfortunately I think we have to pay for Mighty Networks, which sucks. But like I liked Mighty Networks because you can search for threads, you can respond to people's questions, you can post pictures. Discord is very like linear, it's kind of like Slack. I don't know about Twitch. Maybe we should look into Twitch.
And also Discord is really intimidating, I think.
Mighty Networks is expensive, so that would be like, it would like if we're trying to think about like a free platform, and the thing is like I really don't use Facebook. Like I actually like forget about Facebook. So I'm like, if I put this community, if we put it on Facebook, like I don't know, it might just like die on the start. You're asking about where you can find courses about my courses. Go check out my shop in my profile. You'll see the courses that are currently available, that are upcoming, and yeah, just keep an eye out. Like maybe, and if you can't attend them live, I would send the replay. So already 2 have passed. So I did one about capitalism yesterday, and I taught Marx. So for anyone who's Marx curious, like come to this one. I don't know when I'll be doing a next one, but it's, I'll probably have another one. Yes, we do need a good open source platform. We do. But let's keep researching. Let's keep thinking. You think I can do that in Discord? Discord, like have conversations with people and respond? I will look into it, and we'll follow Sabine's advice about Twitch. Like it would be super cool for us all, especially us TikTokers, like spiritual leftist TikTokers. Like there's already this like bond between us, like maybe a little bit of a trauma bond because we're so like yeah, like all the things that we go through on this platform. Like if we were able to take those conversations into a safer place, yeah, and still, I would still that really would, yeah. That really would. Hi, Des. Des is also someone that I highly recommend that you follow. Des is amazing, has a lot to say. You studied philosophy in Germany. You had a lot of Marx. Cool. I like that. My reading of Marx is, I add more. I add like a feminist layer, a decolonial layer. So because Marx obviously is not enough on his own. Yeah. Okay. So thanks, Daz. You're awesome too. We were just talking about like building a decolonial community, open sourced, with all of us who are doing this work together, being able to support people, answer comments, answer questions, promote whatever we're doing, if we're doing workshops or courses that can help people. So we're still thinking about that. Sabine, any last thoughts for us? Anything you want to tell us based on the conversation, how it's gone?
No, I just wanted to thanks everyone for being so kind in the comments. Really, it's super helpful to find your community here and to see that we are not alone. Like having these thoughts on spirituality, and really, it's super encouraging.
I love that. Thanks, Sabine, for being here and for doing the work and being so outspoken on the French side of things. It's super, super important. So you're amazing. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks. You're amazing too.
We love you. The North American side of things is there for you, and we love you. So definitely go give Sabine a follow. So before we close, I'm going to read a poem. This is a poem by my friend Jess X Snow. Highly recommend you check them out. And the poem is called Queer Earth. And this is in context of like nature being queer instead of interpreting it as nature being binary. Thank you both. Oh, I love that. Yeah, and hopefully like if we end up like doing like YouTube stuff, then you can just replay us. You don't have to be on here live. Okay, so if you want to stick around for this poem, I'm gonna go ahead. Okay. Jess starts with a quote by saying, "Sexual expression is only permitted between male and female. Anything else is an abnormality and against nature." So their poem is going to be in response to that statement of like being against nature. "You speak of nature as if you invented it or gutted it and used its bones to fashion a white castle to keep you safe from all the animals you refuse to see. Tonight, each grain of soil, each blade of grass, each droplet of blood is a time machine. Each cell rewinds your 4.5 billion years back in history. We were once genderless cells splitting our own bodies in 2 now growing gills, fins, and feet. 65,000 queer and trans species. It's always mating season on planet Earth. Look at the way leopard slugs make love, upside down from trees, 2 penises coiling into orchids. A penetration so mutual, it is worthy of bioluminescence. Look at the way bonobo monkeys resolve conflict. Queer polyamorous sex in the morning, evening, and afternoon. Look at the penguins mating for life, warming the egg of another mother with the heat between their bellies. When an oyster produces a perfect pearl, they transition from male to female. For crustaceans, gender is a border that does not exist. Do you hear the orchestra of dolphins masturbating against the seabed, penetrating each other's blowholes, as if this human history never began? If our love defies the logic of your biology, then what is queer pleasure if not heavenly? Is this queer ocean not the tidal waves roaring within your bloodstream? Is this queer earth not the same carbon that birthed your flesh? To be queer, earth, and alive is to be hunted and marked wild. A beast banished from heaven, a bleached coral reef, a jungle clear-cut, a planet domesticated like cattle and butchered in the hands of machines. Yet our queerness is an ancient persistence. So tell me we be against nature, and our bones will remember we've been queer for 3.6 billion springs, summers, falls, and winters. And even after your infant empire collapses into dust, we will still be queer.
Thank you so much.
Oh my God, it's so strong. I love this poem. It's so beautiful. So this is, again, to repeat, a poem by Jess Snow called Queer Earth by Jess X Snow. Jess is an amazing, amazing artist and director, photographer, poet, muralist. They're so multi-talented, polyvalent. So with that tender, beautiful poem, we will close, Sabine and I. And remember, the replay will be available on my YouTube, which is, a fledgling little YouTube. I have like 20 subscribers, so I will. It's like not a thing, but I am seeing the need for it now. So I'm gonna link it to, where you click Instagram, it'll take you to my YouTube as well, and you'll be able to see it. And Sabine, I'm gonna share this link with you as well, so you can share it with your community as well.
Okay, great.
Yes, process. And leave comments if you ever do watch the replay. So much love to this community. It's classic stuff. The same handle on everything, on IG, on TikTok. So thank you, Sabine. I want to have you over regularly because you have so much to say and so much to comment on and teach us. Thank you for being here, for popping in.
Thank you so much for hosting this live. This was actually my first ever live, so I'm really glad that we've been through this together.
I'm so glad too. I'm so glad that you're here. Sabine is my emotional support when when I'm really about to have a meltdown and TikTok's affecting me deeply. I go to Sabine. I'm like, what am I doing? I know we really connected like that. Yeah. So thanks, Sabine. Thanks everybody. Really, thanks, Vaysan. Really looking forward to what you do. You've already done so much good. Thank you. You're so sweet. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm here. I'm just me. So if there's anything you need from me, any content, anything, just let me know. I'm happy to. I'm all ears. I'm lending my ears. I'm here for you. So with that, bye everybody.
Bye
Have
everyone.
a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you so much for watching.
Bye Sabine. Thanks for coming.
Bye Steph.
Ciao. Bye.
Salut.
Ciao, ciao.